All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to the GraphQL course for the client side using React. I'm Scott Moss, going to be your instructor today. I love GraphQL. I use GraphQL every single day at my company. Been using it for years. I've taught GraphQL here at Front End Masters a couple times, and this is the first time I'm getting to talk to you all about using GraphQL on the front end, which is slightly different than using it on the server side. And if you're interested in that, we have courses for that. We have an advanced GraphQL course on the server side. We also have an intro to GraphQL for the server side. So definitely check those out if you're interested in that. But this course is going to be focused purely on using GraphQL on the front end using React. So to hop right into it, understanding what GraphQL is, specifically for the client side, GraphQL, at least the way Facebook used GraphQL when it was initially created, was they intended for GraphQL to be used to solve front-end problems as far as like UI related. So you build a UI, mostly in some component architecture using a framework like React or Vue or whatever your favorite library is or framework. And then those components, have props. And usually those components props are like shaped a certain way using something like prop types or something like that. So you get to the point where you start designing or modeling data on the front end exactly the same way that your components need it. So that eventually just translates over to like, well, if the in-memory state that we have on the client is modeled in a way that our components can just consume, how can we extend that to have the server, the data from the server, coming back the exact same way that our components as well? And those were some of the first steps of getting what we have now, which is GraphQL. So that's basically what the purpose of GraphQL on the front end is. It's like, how do we consume data from the server in the exact shape, the exact type that we need it to display it, so we can just take it from the server, throw it right on the page without having to do anything. Just completely eliminate that need to do any post transformations or processing and just throw it on the page. And that's kind of where it started. And now GraphQL has evolved into like a whole nother beast. It's more than just a way to fetch data from a server to throw inside of a component. It's actually its own language and its own process to build a schema for anything and then write queries to resolve into whatever you want. We're just using it for data on a server and on the back end. So for this course, I have a repo for everyone. So first thing, let's just get started with that, is if you go to GitHub, Front End Masters, it's going to be full stack GraphQL. And you can fork that. And then once you do that, you need to check out to the client branch. If you already have the repo, just do a fetch and then check out to the client branch. The master branch has some server-side stuff. There's a solution branch that has all the stuff completed. But what we're focusing on today will be the client branch, which is everything you need. So go ahead and check out to that one. And then in the README, there's a link to the slides that we'll be using today. So follow along, or you can just watch me. There are no dependencies other than just having node version greater than 6. It's purely front end. Everything's already in the package.json. I don't even think you have to install anything. I have everything in the package.json. I have everything in the yarn lock. So I don't think you even have to even run an install command other than the initial one when you pull this repo down. So the first thing is I want to talk about GraphQL, the big picture. Like, what is it? Like when people mention GraphQL, I think there's like different scenarios of what they could be talking about because GraphQL itself covers a lot of things. But basically what I think of GraphQL is, and this is kind of like my definition, is it's a spec that describes a declarative query language that your clients can use to ask an API for the exact data they want. This is achieved by creating a strongly typed schema for your API, ultimate flexibility in how your API can resolve data, and client queries validated against your schema. Now, all that just sounds crazy, but it took me a while to come up with that definition because there's so many different things of what I believe GraphQL is. But basically what this is saying is if you ever use any strong type language like Java or TypeScript or anything like that, imagine putting a type system in front of an existing API. And then now on any client, if they wanted to interact with that API, they could leverage that type system to ask the API for exactly what they wanted. So if you created some types with some fields on it, then you could, from the client, say, give me this data with these exact fields, and the API will respond back with that exact shape. just like if you were using a type system on a strongly typed language. It's basically that. As far as like how the client interacts with it, server side, as you find out, there's a lot more to it. It's actually a graph. You're creating a graph. If you don't know what a graph is, you're going to learn what a graph is, and we'll get into it. Any questions on that? On what is GraphQL? Like after me telling you this definition, I don't expect you to know everything about GraphQL. So if you still don't know what GraphQL is, that's fine. This is just to give you some context. So like I said, it's just a spec. GraphQL itself is not a repo somewhere. It's not a framework. It's literally just a spec. And here's the link to it. If you click this, it'll actually take you to the spec that was created by the people who created GraphQL, which is Facebook. Facebook created GraphQL. And here's the spec for it, and it changes all the time. And if we go to look at this one they have here, you start scrolling. Yeah, it looks like what a spec looks like. Very boring, a lot of stuff that you probably don't want to read, and it just scrolls forever. That's what a spec is. So if you really want to understand how GraphQL works and the ins and outs, then go do this. This is what GraphQL is. It's just this spec. So see how Facebook created this spec, which spawned from some internal thing that they were using. There are several implementations and variations of that spec. So like I said, it's just a spec. People from the community, including Facebook themselves, have taken that spec and created different libraries and frameworks and implementations based off languages and platforms. And like there's just so many different GraphQL things out there.